Welcome. I'm Lee Doherty Biddison.
And I'm Carolyn Kamsty Fowler, and we're your co-hosts for the Johns Hopkins Office of Wellbeing's podcast, Vital Conversations, Influencing Workplace Wellbeing in Healthcare.
We spend a lot of time thinking about how to influence workplace well-being in healthcare, and we're excited to share what we're learning.
Thank you for joining us.
Hello and welcome. This is Lee Doherty Biddison. I'm your host for today's episode of the Vital Conversations podcast. My guest today is Dr. Kelvin Hong. Thank you, Kelvin, for being here. Kelvin is an associate professor of radiology and oncology at Johns Hopkins, and he is also the executive vice chair of the Johns Hopkins Department of Radiology.
Thank you so much.
Grateful to have you with us. What people won't know is that we've just been having a wonderful conversation about travel. But for today, our focus for well-being will actually be on departmental efforts to support the well-being of our clinicians and our faculty and other members of the department. So Kelvin and I, some months ago, I guess by now, started having some conversations about what radiology has been doing to support well-being on a departmental level. And so Kelvin graciously agreed to come and tell us a little bit about it here. And so I'm excited for everybody to get to hear what you all are working on. But as we maybe get started, Kelvin, if you could tell us a little bit about the department itself, its sort of size, makeup, those kinds of things, so people have a vision for what the department looks like and where you're trying to intervene and bring change. And then your approach to thinking about things on a departmental level.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So just a little bit of background, the Department of Radiology at Johns Hopkins actually spans across our health system in the Mid-Atlantic. We have representation from all four hospitals, standalone hospitals, plus actually we have standalone imaging centers, which provides easy access for patients in the Mid-Atlantic region. So 5 other standalone imaging centers. We have almost 140 faculty and plus about just under 1,000 staffing and employees within the department. So the footprint is quite large, and notwithstanding, we've got a large training programs of variety. So this is at least operationally a large group. Hence, I think when the notion of wellness came up and how to represent such a diverse large groups, we struggled. So my chair Karen Horton and I thought about how we might address this, and Lee heads the Wellness Advisory Council within our health system. That frequently I think it is actually frequently a person to spearhead the department. A drive for wellness frequently is a person who has specific interest or may have interest, or we feel has special interest. But the way we thought about it actually led us to go down the path of having myself head this as executive vice chair, was the fact that wellness itself is so important, yet I feel maybe misunderstood and underrepresented, or not sufficient weight has been given to this in many departments. It's and again, I don't speak from a seat of criticism, but frequently it's sort of given to someone who has interest and maybe doesn't have the I think authority or even the weight or leadership opportunities to enact change or impact the department in a meaningful way. So we felt that it would be helpful that I took the approach, and actually having taken the role, I actually have tried to get better understanding of this important role. And this led me down to giving recognition that in many departments, organizations, that frequently the wellness individual has a large responsibility, but is under-resourced, and notwithstanding, has oftentimes not the knowledge base or the specialty knowledge to take on, I think, is such a critical, important component of our daily lives professionally, and it impacts into our personal lives. So I've taken sort of a slightly different role for our department, in that I see it as an important domain that we should focus on, and importantly, that it should be evidence-based. So everything else we do in our jobs frequently is evidence-based. And we tend to take on wellness almost as if it's part of another factor that we might, and I just see it as a challenge or problem or component of our workplace that we should tackle it in a similar manner that we do every other aspect. So I went and did some reading and actually found that wellness is not very well understood, at least in the healthcare setting and healthcare workers, that not sufficient evidence base is being published enough, and also to give recognition that each wellness officer, wellness individual in each department has unique challenges. And from my perspective, my department of radiologists and radiologists itself, has special challenges in wellness that is posed by our specialty on its own. We tend to be individuals that are work quite independently, often by themselves. I think the workplace frequently you work in a dark room because light actually distorts diagnostic radiology film. So we tend to work in dark rooms. It affects circadian rhythms. Some of us are shift workers. There are a lot of, I think, great representation. We almost, a large representation of women as well. So our challenges are a little bit different, but you could say the challenges of our department is similar, that we're very distinctly different, say, from the emergency room, which is entirely shift work, and the challenges are different from surgeons. And so hence, I think it's critical that a lot of the wellness challenges and solutions are somewhat unique. So I felt we should tackle our problems evidence-based for our departments and our constituents. So hence, speaking just from our department, I gave recognition that that we needed to have a department-based focused approach. And so the first initiative that we thought about doing is actually wellness frequently. From my observation, is that I found it less compelling when an individual who wasn't an expert wellness gave lectures or talks or gave advice at faculty meetings or groups about aspects that probably they're not experts on. So I just felt it would be disingenuous for me to come up and tell my faculty that I think they need to focus on their sleep or their wellness or their the way they tend to their personal lives or their finances and all the other aspects that might challenge what the notion of what wellness is. And so I felt it was important to arguably get an expert. So frequently at least medical experts and I think individuals who work in healthcare, I think have over time give credence to that when you speak to experts and their credentials suggest that they have knowledge base or they have the authority to talk about this topic, that you sit up and listen a little bit more carefully.
Yeah.
And so I felt that we could maybe tackle this issue by who should give recommendations, who should advise us, and tied to another problem which I've seemingly encountered once I actually took a look at wellness was the fact that mental health challenges in our department was not that different from other parts of our health system, but arguably even higher because we work in dark rooms and are isolated frequently. And the challenges of all aspects of mental health are being felt throughout our department, and some obviously more than others. And the vulnerable and more pressured frequently don't speak up. And so our access to mental health care in our region is very challenging. So any parent or individual who has tried to seek a mental health access in the last post-COVID era, I can tell you is surprisingly challenging. So number one, access to mental health care, and then even just arguably speaking to someone who may be able to help you with authority is difficult because of the stigma attached to mental health challenges. So I thought, gosh, we just don't even know when we have a problem. We don't know how to get help and we don't know who to talk to. Let's try solve that. And so I've decided to address that by actually having a mental health expert. And in our case, I've actually sourced a psychiatrist who is not on faculty outside our health system, who is actually our wellness consultant, who is giving periodic mental health and wellness talks in our faculty meeting based on evidence-based guidance, and will then guide our faculty and be open hours to talk about confidentially, if not in small groups, of issues that they care about, and that could straddle both wellness, mental health, or just have access to someone who is an expert to turn to. And so we've, on a retainer, sourced a person who's going to help our department, not to provide mental health care, but to be an expert of wellness that actually has the credentials to do so, who has a specific interest in group health. And so I felt that was a different direction to go in. So we funded that ourselves. And so we are providing a department resource. So one, evidence-based education surrounding wellness. Number two, a person who can assist in mental health access and questions related to mental health, and just bounce questions, ideas of individuals who find it hard to speak to another individual that they don't have natural access to. Secondly, a different direction of how we want to address wellness was the fact that I think funding of wellness initiatives is typically in the department ad hoc. So I thought we should just go about it and say, how much is wellness cost us? How much do we value it? And how important is it? And let's put a dollar amount to it. And as a pilot for 1 year, let's put our money to it per individual and give it to them to decide how they might use it. So what we did was cut out within the budget a wellness budget per division, and based on the size of the division, so per head, and give them that amount of money that they can spend within reason, that can muster, approval through the School of Medicine, funding of a process, event, or initiative that is important to them, and have the individuals as a small group decide what that might be. And what has turned out to be, I think, has been really, really good. So far in our department, using the wellness budget this year, different groups have used the money in different ways. Some groups have elected to get some simple exercise equipment that is placed within the reading room, which is the space in which they all sit in dark corners and cubicles. And when they take breaks, they can do exercises or stretching or some type of movement and get out of the chair and move. And they have a little clock to tings for each person. And everybody moves in almost like a circuit of work and wellness. And so that we felt was really great. Some groups have decided they want to get on the Baltimore Harbor pirate ship and go out as a group, because that group specifically valued getting together and celebrating and laughing and just being off physically campus. And so these are just examples how differently people have decided to use their wellness budget. And then obviously there's some cooking lessons, baking trips, book clubs, dinner. So, all different varieties of what they think is important to them. So as a outset in the initial, a pilot, we felt actually as a value, and people have expressed how unusual it is that we have a wellness budget to the department that actually is individually based. Of course, you could argue, what about as a group? So, I, as a wellness officer, still had a small budget to initiate department-wide initiatives that we can also do. So we're trying to tackle wellness, I think, on a individual, group, large group, department level. And then, because the notion of team building versus wellness versus just caring can be very hard to distinguish. But I think putting a dollar amount to it and trying to define how we might do this, and the fact that we are trying. And again, you can never satisfy everybody, but starting somewhere, putting money to it, and making access to someone with credentials of a mental health person was sort of the first direction to go in. And then thirdly, I've just recognized that, people in wellness, and even I as the wellness officer, just are not, strictly speaking, probably credentialed or trained enough. So, I'm going to hopefully get some more training and educate myself to make sure that what we're trying to achieve is has value and is evidence-based, or has some type of background, that our initiatives are not just, some essentially arbitrary, and that it's organized.
There are so many things in what you've just said that are so wonderful and encouraging. There are a couple of things that I think really struck me when we talked before, and also when you're talking today. And one of them is really about agency and how important agency is for all of us in terms of determining what we need. And just the way that, your radiology has sort of honored the agency of the various divisions to choose something that works for their group using their budget, whether it's exercise, because all of these things are associated with well-being. In our office, we joke that everything is a well-being issue. There isn't anything that really doesn't touch the well-being of our workforce. But what one division needs at any given time to get up and move to, that those components for the group that's in the reading rooms versus another group that really needs the social connection. Just the approach is really, I just love that it honors both that diversity of need and the agency of the folks who are engaging, to really, lay hold of sort of what's most important to them. So I have a couple of questions for you. One of them is just around what has surprised you in this journey, of this work in radiology.
Surprising that the leadership was willing, number one, to back it. And again, I think it takes, good leadership to recognize that since we eventually do spend money on it, why don't we just proactively do it and plan it? And if you do that, it then needs to go into the budget. And so that's insightful leadership to do this. And I was surprised thinking that we might get some resistance of putting this through, but we have not. Number two, that wellness is so different to individuals, and the disparate views on wellness, and some people dismiss it, all the way to people who crave it. And so giving recognition to the fact that everybody approaches wellness to a different group, but I think that the important thing is that when presented, they actually all gravitate towards it. Because when you say, you can spend the money anywhere you want, or the IO group, which is more, has greater bravado. These are people doing procedures every day, decide to go to Top Golf and have, a fun day out, which is so different from another group, shows you again that they were very happy to embrace it. But, you ask them what they think of wellness, and some people will dismiss it. Because it is still, I think, uncomfortable to some individuals, and even in this day and age the fact that they have wellness needs. So again, I think it's somewhat surprising to me that, given the opportunity, people embrace it. But the notion, whether it's like in many, I think, buzzwords in our vernacular now, some of the time that wellness, does not get the credit it needs, despite the fact that it's so critical, it has been surprising. I've been surprised by how it's been received. And I think in this next year, in the FY25, we'll find that our people are asking for what are the extremes of what we can do. And I think that's will be the next, phase of just constraining people, not going off the reserve, and making sure that it's well thought out. But I think we have to give recognition. It's been surprising me what wellness means to each individual. And I think again, it allows me and I think the department to recognize that the diversity of the needs, why it's so hard to make it'll work for everybody. So we just need to make sure that we have mechanisms and outlets, or give the groups sufficient opportunities to try address it in their own way. I think will go a whole long way. My next step is probably arguing is to quantify this, whether we can measure this, and arguably this is what is probably more important, that we have evidence-based backing of some of these initiatives, because it's actually not in the literature and arguably very, very important. So probably what I'd like to say is probably the return on investment for, creating a wellness budget is that we can maybe measure this. And so I would, starting to try and understand some of the survey or quality of life or impact scores that this might be able to be measured, and then to have faculty who, may respond better to some of these surveys, given recognition that they might, continue some of these benefits to allow them to do whatever they see is valuable to them, since they've chosen to do it, and might, hopefully get also meaningful data out of this. So that's sort of the next stage.
Folks who are listening can't see me grinning from ear to ear because this measurement thing is a passion of mine. So I'm excited to hopefully have more conversations around measurement with you. And it's a perfect segue to sort of my next question, which is around what does success look like? And we think about surveys and things like that, and measuring burnout, fulfillment, engagement, and those types of things, which I think are critical. But are there other components of a successful approach to this that are, top of mind for you and for Dr. Horton as you think about this?
I suppose in the long run, I would love to see this reflected in, obviously the satisfaction surveys and the Chris Gainey of the staff, and other standardized surveys that our school and healthcare system, takes. But I'm not sure it will. It's a hard measure, but that would be fantastic to show some impact on those scores and changes. I think just obviously just from a personal level that, seemingly the individuals are giving us credit for trying is helpful. I'm hoping that it changes some retention rates that we may be able to see. It's so multifactorial, but we obviously need to just take cognizance of the fact that sometimes doing the right thing doesn't always have a measurable outcome, so long as it's valued from a positive light. But I'm hoping to see some changes in that. And then obviously if we can use some standardized survey data that will drive this. But I think even the notion that, hey, you have to, we're hoping that the survey results from XYZ, will help to continue the funding of the wellness budget. Hopefully we'll get some positive reaction, because again, this is an initiative that we've actually started out with very little asking back, which is unusual in medicine. Typically when things are funded, or they're asking for some outlay of work or labor or some effort, that this is seen as a really a freebie. But I think it's obviously a critical component as we as leaders and the workplace should be providing in some way, at least give a notion that we think this is important and this impacts how you perform at work. And then hopefully this does have a measurable outcome.
Yeah, I completely agree. You mentioned retention, which I think is such an important piece of this equation, right? We work with such amazing colleagues, and, being able to keep those teams going and supported and productive in the ways that are meaningful to them, not just, cogs in a wheel, but in ways that are engaged and meaningful, I think is really important, and it's got to be one of our most important, returns on investment. You made the point earlier that, we're going to spend this money one way or another. Well, why not spend it up front? And when we think about turnover and recruitment and those kind of things, which are incredibly costly, these investments that we make up front makes so much sense. And the ROI, we think, although to your earlier point, we really need to do more work to demonstrate that, we think are really worthwhile. Kelvin, thank you so much for taking the time to chat today. It's been such a pleasure. What didn't I ask you that I should have asked you?
Oh, no, I think you've covered it all. You've taken on a large, challenging job of addressing wellness in a stressed out, large scale health system. But nonetheless, I think it's very, very important. I think we're making headway within all the departments. Again, hopefully, some of these individual experiences can drive some more standardized approaches, throughout our school. Will certainly help a lot. So appreciate what you do too.
Thank you so much. And thank you to our listeners for being with us today. See you next time.
So that's it for today. If you enjoyed what you heard, please share this podcast with a colleague. And as always, we welcome your feedback.
If there are any topics you'd like to hear about, please email us at owb@jhmi.edu.